My name is Keisha, and at 32 years old, I have mastered the art of being underestimated. To my family, I am the failure, the one who sells hair bundles and lip gloss out of the trunk of a car, living in a modest brick ranch house in South Fulton. They do not know that my side hustle evolved years ago into a multi-million-dollar beauty supply empire and a portfolio of commercial real estate that I own outright. I keep my wealth quiet because I learned early on that money changes people, especially family. I was sweeping my front porch that Tuesday afternoon when a white Range Rover with tinted windows pulled up to my curb looking ridiculously out of place on my quiet working-class street. It was a rental. I noted the barcode sticker still on the windshield, but to my sister, appearances were everything. The driver's side door opened and Tiana stepped out, her red bottom heels clicking loudly against the pavement. She adjusted her oversized sunglasses and wrinkled her nose as if the air in my neighborhood smelled different than the air in her gated community in Buckhead. Tiana was 3 years older than me and had spent her entire life chasing status. She wore a tracksuit covered in Gucci logos that I knew for a fact was from last season, but she wore it like it was couture. To her, image was the only currency that mattered. She scanned my yard, shaking her head with that familiar look of pity mixed with disdain that she reserved specifically for me. Behind her, the passenger door opened and her husband Brad emerged. Brad was a tall white man with slicked back hair and a suit that fit a little too tightly around the waist. He worked in finance or stocks or something vague that involved moving other people's money around. He always looked at me with a calculating expression, his blue eyes scanning my property, not with familial warmth, but with the cold assessment of an appraiser looking for a quick flip. He wiped sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief, looking nervous, or perhaps just uncomfortable being this far south of the city. He checked his watch 3 times in the span of 10 seconds. Still living in this little box, Keisha, Tiana called out, instead of a greeting, breezing past me without a hug. You really need to level up, sis. It is embarrassing telling my friends my sister lives in the hood. I gripped the broom handle tighter, but forced a smile. It is paid for, Tiana, I said calmly. I like knowing I have a roof over my head that the bank cannot take away. Tiana laughed, a high-pitched sound that lacked any real joy. That is cute, she said dismissively. But Brad and I are building an empire. You would not understand high finance. We just closed a massive deal, which is why we are celebrating with this cruise. She gestured vaguely at the rental car, as if it proved her point. I watched Brad walk around to the back seat to retrieve their luggage. He moved with a jerky, agitated energy that put me on edge. Usually he was smooth, full of charm and business buzzwords, but today he looked like a man walking a tightrope. He caught me staring and flashed a quick plastic smile that did not reach his eyes before turning his attention back to the car. I had a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach, the kind of instinct that had saved me more than once in business, but I pushed it down. I wanted to believe they were just stressed about their trip. I had no idea they were stressed because they were about to commit a crime. Brad opened the rear door of the SUV and pulled out a small, battered duffel bag that looked like it had seen better days. A moment later, my niece Maya climbed out. At 10 years old, she was small for her age, with big, observant eyes that seemed to take in everything while giving away nothing. She wore a faded t-shirt and jeans that were slightly too short at the ankles, a stark contrast to her mother's flashy designer gear. While Tiana was dripping in labels, her daughter looked like an afterthought. Maya did not run to me or smile. She simply stood by the car, clutching a worn-out sketchbook against her chest, like a shield. It broke my heart every time I saw her. According to Tiana, Maya had not spoken a single word since she was 5 years old, retreating into a shell of silence that no doctor or therapist had been able to crack. Tiana walked over and took the duffel bag from Brad, thrusting it into my arms with a sigh of exhaustion that seemed entirely performative. Here is her stuff, Tiana said, checking her reflection in the side mirror of the car. Good luck getting anything out of her. She has been even more impossible than usual lately. It is like living with a ghost. I honestly do not know how I deal with it without losing my mind. I need this vacation more than you can imagine. 2 weeks of sun sea and absolutely no silent stares judging me from across the room. I looked down at Maya, who was watching a stray cat across the street, ignoring her mother completely. She is a child, Tiana, I said, keeping my voice level. She is not judging you. She is probably just lonely. Tiana rolled her eyes, a gesture that looked ridiculous on a 35-year-old woman. You do not have to live with it, she snapped. Anyway, Brad and I are going all out. We booked the owner's suite on the Royal Caribbean. Private balcony, butler service, the works. It is our 10-year anniversary, technically, if you count the years we dated, and we deserve to celebrate our success. She flashed a smile at Brad, who was busy checking his watch and looking up and down the street, as if he expected the police to roll up at any second. Yeah, Brad muttered, his eyes darting around. We really need to get going, Tiana. The traffic to the port is going to be a nightmare. Tiana waved him off. Relax, babe. We have plenty of time. She turned back to me, her expression hardening. Look, just keep her alive and out of trouble. She does not need much. Just feed her chicken nuggets and sit her in front of the iPad. She is basically a piece of furniture that breathes. The casual cruelty in her voice made my stomach turn. I wanted to scream at her to ask how she could talk about her own flesh and blood like that, but I knew it would not do any good. Tiana had always lacked a maternal instinct, viewing Maya more as an accessory that had gone out of style than a human being. I reached out and gently touched Maya's shoulder. Hey, sweetie, I said softly. I am glad you are here. We are going to have a good time. Maya did not react, did not lean into my touch, but she did not pull away either. That was progress. Brad slammed the trunk shut, the noise making us all jump. Tiana, let us go, he said, his voice sharp with an edge of panic I had not heard before. We cannot miss this boat. Tiana glared at him but finally relented. Fine. She turned to me one last time, her eyes narrowing. Oh, I almost forgot. I made something for you. A little thank you gift for watching the burden. Do not say I never gave you anything. She reached into her oversized tote bag and pulled out a sleek stainless steel thermos. Here is the special detox tea I was telling you about, Tiana said, thrusting the stainless steel container into my hands. The metal was still warm to the touch. It is a custom blend I got from my holistic doctor in Buckhead. Very expensive and very exclusive. She leaned in closer, her perfume clouding around me, thick and floral. You need to drink this tonight, Keisha. All of it. It is fantastic for the heart and the skin. Honestly, you have been looking a little gray lately, and this will flush out all those toxins from the cheap food you eat. I took the thermos, feeling the weight of it in my hands. It was heavy, substantial. For a split second, I felt a pathetic flutter of gratitude in my chest. Despite the backhanded compliment about my complexion and my diet, this was a gift. My sister, who usually only gave me criticism, was giving me something she claimed was valuable. I wanted so badly to believe it was an olive branch, a sign that maybe beneath all the layers of pretension, she still cared about my well-being. Thank you, Tiana, I said quietly, gripping the bottle. I will drink it tonight. I appreciate you thinking of me. Tiana smiled, but it was that tight, practiced expression she used for photos. Good, she said, patting my cheek with a manicured hand. Make sure you drink it while it is hot. It works better that way. Just relax tonight, put your feet up and let it do its work. By morning, you will feel like a completely different person. Brad suddenly slammed his hand against the roof of the car, startling us both. Tiana, we have to go now, he barked, his voice losing its smooth veneer. The schedule is tight. We are going to miss the boarding window if you keep chatting. I looked at Brad, expecting to see his usual impatience or anxiety. But what I saw froze the blood in my veins. He was not looking at Tiana. He was not looking at the road. He was staring directly at the thermos in my hands. His gaze was intense, unblinking, and utterly cold. It was the look of a predator watching a trap snap shut. For a moment, the nervous energy that had defined him since they arrived vanished, replaced by a chilling stillness. He looked from the thermos to my eyes, and for a fraction of a second his mask slipped. There was no brotherly affection there, no annoyance, just a dark, expectant hunger. "Get in the car, Tiana," Brad commanded, his eyes snapping back to his wife. Tiana huffed, clearly annoyed at being ordered around, but she complied, opening the driver's side door. "Love you, sis. Enjoy the quiet time," she called out over her shoulder. She climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine, the powerful purr of the Range Rover shattering the afternoon silence of my street. Brad did not say goodbye. He just got into the passenger seat and stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched tight. As the car pulled away from the curb, I stood on my porch, clutching the warm thermos to my chest. I watched them drive down the street until the white SUV turned the corner and disappeared from view, leaving me alone in the sudden quiet of the afternoon. The encounter had felt strange, rushed and heavy with unspoken tension, but I pushed the unease aside, telling myself I was just being paranoid. I looked down at the silver bottle in my hand. My sister wanted me to be healthy. That had to be a good thing. I turned back to the front door, ready to go inside and start my babysitting duties, not realizing I was holding my own death warrant. I walked back into the house and threw the deadbolt, locking the world out. The silence of the empty house usually brought me peace, but today it felt heavy, loaded with the unspoken tension of the driveway encounter. I carried the silver thermos into the kitchen and set it down on the granite island. My mind was still replaying the interaction with Tiana. She had been cruel, yes, but she had also given me this tea. Maybe I was being too hard on her. Maybe this was her clumsy way of trying to connect without having to actually say the words or apologize. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe that beneath the layers of greed and insecurity, there was still a sister who loved me. I unscrewed the cap of the thermos. Steam curled up, carrying a strong herbal scent. It smelled like peppermint and something else, something bitter and metallic that made my nose wrinkle. Tiana said it was a detox blend, so the bitterness made sense. I reached into the cupboard and pulled out my favorite ceramic mug, the one with the hand-painted sunflowers. I poured the dark liquid, watching it swirl in the cup. It was still piping hot, just like she said to drink it. I lifted the mug to my lips, blowing gently to cool it down, telling myself that one cup of tea would not hurt. It was a gesture of goodwill, and I was tired of fighting. Suddenly there was a blur of motion from the hallway. I did not even hear footsteps. One second I was standing alone in my kitchen, the next a small body collided with my arm with shocking force. The impact was precise and deliberate. The mug flew from my hand. It seemed to hang in the air for a heartbeat before smashing against the tiled floor. Dark liquid splattered across my white cabinets and soaked into my socks. Shards of ceramic skittered under the refrigerator. The smell of the tea hit the hot floor and rose up in a pungent cloud. I stood there for a moment, stunned, staring at the mess. Then anger flared hot and fast. Tiana had warned me that Maya was difficult, that she was a burden, but this was beyond difficult. This was violent. I turned to face my niece, ready to scold her, ready to ask her what on earth possessed her to do that. "Maya, what is wrong with you?" I started to say, my voice rising, but the words died in my throat. Maya was not cowering. She was not looking at the floor or hiding behind her hair like the timid, damaged child I had seen in the driveway just minutes ago. She was standing perfectly straight, her chin lifted, her eyes locked on mine with an intensity that was terrifyingly adult. The vacancy I had seen in her gaze outside was gone, replaced by a sharp, piercing intelligence. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Then she opened her mouth. I expected a sound, a grunt, maybe a cry. Instead, a voice came out. It was not the voice of a child who had not spoken in 10 years. It was clear, steady, and chillingly calm. "Auntie, do not drink that," she said, her diction perfect. "Mommy put poison in it. She wants you dead tonight." The shock hit me in waves, each one crashing harder than the last. I stared at my niece, my brain refusing to process the reality before me. The shattered mug lay between us, a jagged ceramic island in a puddle of toxic tea. "You can speak?" I whispered, my voice trembling. It was a stupid question, given what she had just said, but it was the only one my paralyzed mind could form. Maya stepped over the mess, her movements precise and careful. "I am not mute," she said, her voice steady and devoid of the childish lilt one would expect from a 10-year-old. "I never was. I just learned a long time ago that it is safer to be silent in a house full of wolves. If you do not speak, they forget you are there. And when they forget you are there, they say things they shouldn't." She walked over to the kitchen island and hopped up onto one of the bar stools, her legs dangling, but her posture regale. She looked less like a child and more like a weary adult trapped in a small body. "I have been waiting for them to leave so I could warn you," she continued. "I knew they would bring me here eventually. They needed a babysitter, and you are the only one Tiana thinks is stupid enough to do it for free." "Stupid?" I repeated, a flash of indignation cutting through my shock. Maya held up a small hand. Her words, not mine. "She thinks you are a pushover. She thinks you are desperate for her approval. That is why you are the perfect target." Target for what, I asked, though? The cold dread pooling in my stomach told me I already knew the answer. "For the insurance money," Maya stated matter-of-factly. "The $5 million policy you took out last year. The one where you listed Tiana as the beneficiary in case anything happened to you." I grabbed the counter for support. "How do you know about that?" "I never told anyone except my lawyer. They know everything," Maya said. "Brad hacked your email months ago. He has been tracking your accounts. They know about the real estate portfolio too, but the insurance is the quick cash they need right now. They are broke, Auntie. Completely tapped out. The house in Buckhead is in foreclosure. The cars are leased. Brad owes money to people who break legs for a living. They need $5 million by Monday or they are dead. So they decided it was better if you died instead." She said it with such chilling detachment that I shivered. "I watched them plan it last night," Maya went on. "They thought I was asleep. Brad was mixing the powder in the kitchen. He said it is a heart medication derived from foxglove. In high doses, it causes cardiac arrest. It looks like a natural heart attack. Tiana was crying at first, saying she didn't want to hurt you, but Brad told her it was either you or them. He said you were just a lonely spinster anyway, and your money would finally be put to good use." Maya looked down at the puddle of tea on the floor. "Tiana stopped crying after that. She helped him pour it into the thermos. She said she would make sure you drank it all. She even practiced the speech she would give at your funeral." I looked at this child, this tiny, terrifying creature who had absorbed so much darkness in her short life. She wasn't just smart. She was a survivor, a spy in her own home. And she had just handed me the weapon I needed to fight back. I needed proof. Not because I didn't believe the terrifying clarity in Maya's eyes, but because my brain was frantically trying to reject the idea that my own sister wanted me dead. I scrambled up from the floor, my socks squishing in the poisoned liquid. "Stay there," I told Maya, my voice tight. I rushed to the hallway closet where I kept my overflow business inventory. People assume the beauty supply game is just wigs and lashes, but when you are importing chemical treatments and skin creams from overseas vendors, you have to be careful. I had been burned before by suppliers cutting corners with dangerous fillers. Now I kept high-grade chemical testing kits on hand to spot-check every shipment that landed in my warehouse. I grabbed a toxicology screening box and ran back to the kitchen. Maya had not moved. She watched with disjointed curiosity as I tore open the packaging. I pulled out a pipette and a multi-panel test strip designed to detect various organic and inorganic compounds, including heavy metals and common pharmaceutical toxins. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the pipette. I managed to suck up a small amount of the dark liquid from the floor and deposit it onto the reactant pads. "Now we wait," I whispered, though the silence in the room was already deafening. 2 minutes. That was all it took for the chemistry to strip away the last of my denial. I watched the color chart, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The pads sensitive to cardiac glycosides, a class of drugs derived from plants like foxglove, began to change. It did not just turn a faint shade, it turned a dark, violent crimson. I cross-referenced it with the guide. Digoxin, a powerful heart medication. In small doses, it regulates heart failure. In the concentration staring up at me from the floor, it causes fatal arrhythmia. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the granite countertop, my knuckles turning white. It was real. This was not a prank. It was not a misunderstood conversation. My sister. The woman I had shared a bedroom with, the woman whose hair I had braided, the woman I had bailed out of debt more times than I could count, had handed me a cup of death with a smile on her face. Bile rose in my throat. I looked at the shattered mug, then at the thermos still sitting on the counter. It was not a gift. It was a weapon. See, Maya said softly. She did not sound triumphant. She just sounded tired. Daddy Brad steals the pills from his grandmother. He crushes them into powder. He says it tastes bitter, so they needed the strong tea to hide it. I looked at my niece, this 10-year-old witness to conspiracy, and felt a surge of protective rage that momentarily eclipsed the fear. They had done this in front of her. They had planned a murder while their child watched, assuming she was too broken or too stupid to understand. They were wrong. About her and about me. I took a deep breath, forcing the tremors in my hands to stop. I looked at the test strip one last time, cementing the image of that crimson line in my mind. Then I looked at Maya. You were right, I said, my voice steadying into the tone I used when closing a $1 million deal. They really are trying to kill me. But they made a mistake. They left me alive. I stared at the crimson test strip, my mind reeling. My own sister wanted me dead. Not just gone, but dead. And she had used her child as a pawn to do it. I looked up at Maya, expecting to see fear or confusion. Instead, I saw a resignation that was far too old for her face. Why, I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. Why would she do this? Tiana loves money, but she loves being alive more. Murder is insane. It is desperate. Maya hopped down from the stool and walked over to the fridge. She pulled out a juice box and poked the straw in with a satisfying snap. They are broke, Auntie, she said calmly, taking a sip. Like $0 broke. Brad is not a stockbroker. He ran a Ponzi scheme. He took money from investors and spent it on cars and trips and watches. Now the money is gone, and the people he took it from are angry. Very angry. She took another sip of juice. Last week, 2 men came to the house while you were at work. They did not knock. They kicked the door in. They told Brad he had 2 weeks to pay back $2 million plus interest, or they would start cutting off fingers. Tiana was screaming and crying, begging them not to hurt her. Brad promised them he had a plan. He said he had a golden goose that was about to lay a big egg. I felt bile rise in my throat. I was the golden goose. My hard work, my success, my life. It was all just a payday to them. Maya continued, her voice devoid of emotion. Tiana knows about your life insurance policy, the one for $5 million. She knows she is the beneficiary. Brad did the math. $5 million pays off the loan sharks, buys them new identities, and leaves enough to disappear to a country without an extradition treaty. They talked about Costa Rica. Tiana said she always wanted to live near the beach. The sheer callousness of it took my breath away. Tiana was not just a desperate wife following a bad husband. She was an active participant. She was planning her beach vacation on the proceeds of my murder. She had looked me in the eye, handed me a poisoned drink, and told me it was for my health, all while dreaming of sipping margaritas on a beach paid for with my blood. They sold the house in Buckhead 3 months ago, Maya added. They have been renting it back from the new owners just to keep up appearances. The cars are getting repossessed next Tuesday. This cruise was their deadline. Either they come back rich or they do not come back at all. And for them to be rich, you have to be dead by tomorrow morning. I looked at the girl standing in my kitchen. She was the only thing standing between me and a shallow grave. My sister did not just want to kill me, she wanted to erase me, she wanted to cash out my life to fix her mistakes. The betrayal was so deep, so total, that it burned away the last shreds of my denial. Tiana was not my family anymore, she was a predator, and I was done being prey. You think that was it? Maya asked, watching me dispose of the toxicology test strip. Her voice was devoid of relief, cutting through the silence like a knife. The T was just Plan A ante. It was the quiet way. The way that lets them sleep at night telling themselves it was a tragic medical accident. But Brad does not like to leave things to chance. He says you are like a cockroach, hard to kill. I stiffened, feeling the blood drain from my face again, just as it had started to return. What do you mean, Plan A? I asked, my hand hovering over the counter. If you are not dead by morning, they have a backup, Maya explained calmly, hopping down from the stool. Brad hired a man, a junkie he knows from the old neighborhood. He is coming here at 2 in the morning. He is supposed to break in through the back door. If the poison worked, he just has to stage a robbery. Make it look like you died of fright or a heart attack during the break-in. But if you are still breathing, he has instructions to finish the job. A knife, I think. Brad said guns are too loud for this neighborhood. The brutality of it stunned me. My brother-in-law had not just planned a murder, he had planned a fail-safe execution. He had hired a hitman to butcher me in my own home if his wife failed to poison me. It was methodical. It was professional. And it was happening in less than 6 hours. I looked at the clock on the microwave. 8:15. I had time, but not much. Fear tried to claw its way up my throat again, but this time I shoved it down. I was done being afraid. I was done being the victim, the doormat, the ghetto sister they looked down on. They wanted a fight, they were going to get one. But they were not fighting Keisha the hair lady. They were fighting Keisha the CEO. The woman who negotiated million-dollar contracts and stared down shark investors. I pulled my business phone from my pocket. It was an encrypted device I used for my high-level real estate dealings, the one Tiana did not know existed. I scrolled to a contact labeled simply M. Marcus. I said when he answered on the first ring. It is Keisha. Code red at the residence. I need a full perimeter lockdown and tactical team standby. No police, not yet. I want to catch the rat before we call the exterminator. Marcus did not ask questions. He was former military, the head of a private security firm I had hired 2 years ago when my competitors started getting aggressive. He knew exactly who I was and what I was worth. ETA 10 minutes, boss. He replied, his voice a low rumble of reassurance. We are bringing the toys. I hung up and looked at Maya. Her eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her stoic armor. Who is Marcus? She asked quietly. He is the guy who keeps the monsters away, I said, walking over to the security panel by the back door. I punched in a code that disabled the silent alarm but activated the internal motion sensors. I turned to my niece, my face set in grim determination. Your parents think I am a sheep, Maya. They think I am helpless. Tonight they are going to learn that I am the wolf. Go to the guest room and lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. We have company coming and I want to be ready to greet them. Marcus arrived exactly 9 minutes later. He did not park in the driveway. Instead, a black van rolled silently into the alley behind my house. I opened the back door, and 3 men dressed in tactical black gear slipped inside like shadows. Marcus was the last one in. He was a mountain of a man with eyes that missed nothing. He took one look at the shattered mug on the floor and the tension in my posture and nodded once. We need to move fast, he said, his voice a low rumble. If the target is coming at 2, we have less than 4 hours to turn this house into a cage. His team moved with terrifying efficiency. One man nicknamed Tech immediately went to the breaker box, while another started setting up small wireless cameras in the corners of every room. These were not the grainy nanny cams you buy online. These were military-grade night vision and thermal imaging units. They would see everything, even in total darkness. I turned to Maya, who was watching the men work with wide, unblinking eyes. Come with me, I said, taking her hand. We walked to the master bedroom closet. It was a walk-in reinforced with steel beams, a modification I had made when I started keeping large amounts of cash in the house for vendor payments. It was the safest place in the house. "I need you to stay in here," I told her, kneeling so we were eye to eye. "No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you do not open this door until I say the code word. Do you understand?" Maya nodded. "What is the code word?" she asked, her voice steady. "Sourdough," I said, smiling faintly at the memory of the bread that started my empire. I closed the door and heard the heavy click of the lock. She was safe. Now it was my turn. I walked back into the living room. Tech looked up from a laptop screen that was already displaying a grid of 6 different camera angles. "We are live, boss," he said. "Sensors are active on all windows and doors. If a fly lands on the porch, we will know." Marcus handed me a small earpiece. "Keep this in. I will be in the van monitoring the perimeter. My guys are hidden in the garage and the guest room. When he comes in, let him get all the way to the bedroom. We need him to commit to the act. If we take him too early, he can claim he just broke in to steal a TV. We need intent." I nodded, understanding the cold logic. I was bait. I had to let a killer walk right up to my bed before the trap could snap shut. "Kill the lights," I ordered. The house plunged into darkness. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to grow louder in the silence. I walked to my bedroom, navigating by memory. I arranged pillows under the duvet, creating a shape that looked like a sleeping body in the dim light filtering through the curtains. Then I sat in the high-back chair in the corner, hidden by the shadows. I gripped the taser Marcus had given me. It felt heavy and cold. The waiting was the hardest part. Every creak of the house settling sounded like a footstep. Every rustle of leaves outside sounded like a breath. I watched the red digital numbers on my alarm clock change. 11, midnight, 1. The silence stretched thin, tight as a piano wire. I controlled my breathing, forcing my heart to slow down. I was not Keisha the sister. I was not Keisha the aunt. I was the wolf waiting in the dark. And I was ready to bite. The digital clock on my nightstand flipped to 2:00, right on schedule. The silence in the house shifted instantly, becoming heavy and charged. A faint scratching sound echoed from the back of the house near the laundry room window. It was the sound of metal prying against wood, a noise that would have been missed by anyone sleeping, but to me it sounded like a gunshot. "Target entry, rear window." Marcus's voice whispered in my earpiece. "He is inside. Hold." I sat frozen in the high-backed chair, my body pressed into the shadows of the corner. My grip on the taser was so tight my knuckles ached. I watched the bedroom door, which I had left slightly ajar. A beam of moonlight cut across the floorboards, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. A shadow fell across the light. It moved with a twitchy, erratic energy. The intruder pushed the door open further. He was thin, wiry, wearing a dark hoodie pulled low over his face. He smelled of stale cigarettes and nervous sweat, a sharp odor that drifted across the room. He did not look around. He did not check the corners. His eyes were locked on the bed. I had arranged the pillows and duvet perfectly. In the dim light, it looked exactly like a woman sleeping on her side, back turned to the door, defenseless. The man crept forward, his sneakers squeaking faintly on the hardwood. As he passed through a patch of moonlight, I saw it. A knife. It was not a professional weapon. It was a long, serrated kitchen knife, the kind you use to carve a turkey. The blade was stained and dull, but it was long enough to kill. He reached the side of the bed. He did not hesitate. He did not check to see if I was awake. He raised the knife high above his head with both hands. Then he brought it down. The sound was a dull thud, followed by the tearing of fabric. He grunted with the effort, pulling the blade free and plunging it down again and again. It was a frenzy of violence. He stabbed the mound of pillows with a terrifying ferocity, feathers puffing into the air like white smoke. He was panting now, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. After the 5th strike, he stopped. He froze, his hand still gripping the handle of the knife buried deep in the mattress. He realized there was no sound, no scream, no struggle, no blood. He ripped the duvet back with his free hand, exposing the shredded remains of my down pillows. "What the hell?" he hissed, his voice raspy and confused. He spun around, his eyes wild, scanning the dark room. He knew he had been tricked. He knew the hunter had become the hunted. I stood up from the chair, the taser humming to life in my hand. The red laser dot danced across his chest, settling right over his heart. "Wrong bed," I said, my voice ice cold. The intruder snarled, lunging toward me with the knife raised. He was fast, fueled by the desperate adrenaline of a cornered animal. But I was ready. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I squeezed the trigger. Two barbed probes shot out from the taser, trailing thin copper wires through the air. They hit him square in the chest and stomach with a solid thwack. The effect was instantaneous. The 50,000-volt shock overrode his nervous system, locking his muscles in a violent, seizing contraction. His body went rigid as a board. The knife clattered uselessly to the hardwood floor, sliding away into the shadows. He collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut, hitting the ground with a heavy bone-rattling thud. He groaned through gritted teeth, twitching uncontrollably as the 5-second cycle completed. "Clear," Marcus shouted, bursting through the bedroom door with two of his tactical team members. They moved with the precision of a pack of wolves. One operative kicked the knife into the far corner, securing the weapon, while the other dropped a heavy knee onto the intruder's back, pinning him to the floor before he could even try to draw a breath. Marcus pulled a pair of heavy-duty zip ties from his vest. In seconds, the man's hands were wrenched behind his back and secured, his ankles bound tight. I stepped forward, keeping the taser raised, though I knew the fight was over. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but my hands remained steady. I looked down at the man who had come to butcher me in my sleep. He was gasping for air, sweat beading on his pale forehead, his eyes darting around the room in sheer panic. He looked pathetic now, stripped of his weapon and his element of surprise. "Get him up!" I ordered, my voice cutting through the heavy silence of the room. Marcus hauled the man into a kneeling position by the back of his hoodie. The intruder slumped forward, coughing, his bravado entirely evaporated. I grabbed the high-backed chair I had been sitting in and dragged it over, sitting down so I was eye level with him. I pulled out my phone and started a video recording. "Look at me," I said, my tone as hard as diamond. The man looked up. His pupils were blown wide, fear radiating off him in waves. He saw the tactical gear on Marcus, the grim faces of the security team, and the cold fury in my eyes. He realized he had made a fatal error. He had expected a helpless sleeping woman. Instead, he had walked into a war room. "You have exactly one chance to walk out of this house alive," I told him, holding the phone steady. "If you lie to me, if you hesitate for even a second, I will let Marcus have a conversation with you in the garage. And Marcus does not have my patience." The man swallowed hard, his gaze flicking to the mountain of a man standing beside me. Marcus cracked his knuckles, the sound loud and sharp in the quiet room. "Who sent you?" I asked. The man hesitated, his eyes shifting to the side. I do not know names, just a guy. Met him at a bar." "Liar," I snapped. "You know exactly who he is. You are going to say his name, and you are going to say it clearly for the camera. Or so help me God, you will wish the taser was the worst thing that happened to you tonight." He looked at the camera lens, then back at me. He saw the resolve in my face. He saw a woman who had built an empire from the trunk of a car, a woman who had survived poverty and ridicule and betrayal. He realized I was far more dangerous than the man who had hired him. "It was Brad," he croaked, his voice trembling. "Brad Wilson." "Say the whole thing," I commanded. "Who hired you and what for?" "Brad Wilson hired me." He rushed out the words, tumbling over each other in his haste to please me. "He told me to break in. He said if you were already dead, make it look like a robbery. If you were alive, I was supposed to finish the job. He promised me 10 grand. I ended the recording. The evidence was secured. I stood up, smoothing the front of my silk robe. I looked down at the man with nothing but cold contempt. 10 grand, I repeated. My life was worth $10,000 to my brother-in-law. That is an insult. I turned to Marcus. "Get him out of my sight. Lock him in the basement utility room until we are ready for the police. And Marcus, make sure he stays comfortable. We need him singing just as loud for the detectives when the time comes." Marcus nodded, a grim smile touching his lips. "Yes, ma'am." As they dragged the man away, I walked to the window and looked out at the dark street. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold, hard clarity in its place. Brad and Tiana had played their hand. Now it was my turn to flip the table. They wanted a tragedy. I was about to give them one, just not the one they expected. Marcus dragged the groaning hitman toward the basement door, his boots heavy on the hardwood. I watched them go, feeling a cold knot of disgust in my stomach. The man was just a tool, a blunt instrument hired by a coward. The real monsters were still out there thinking they were safe. I turned and walked back into the living room where Tech was hunched over his equipment, the glow of multiple monitors illuminating his focused face. He was typing furiously, his fingers flying across the keyboard in a blur. "Any luck?" I asked, leaning over his shoulder. Tech did not look up. Brad has decent encryption for an amateur, but he uses the same password for everything: his birthday. It took me about 3 minutes to bypass his cloud security. I am pulling up his geolocation and accessing the camera and microphone on his phone now. A moment later, a new window popped up on the main screen. The image was grainy at first, adjusting to the low light, but then it sharpened. I expected to see the polished teak deck of a cruise liner or the interior of a luxury cabin. Tiana had bragged nonstop about the owner suite and the butler service. Instead, I saw beige peeling wallpaper and a carpet that looked like it had not been cleaned since the 90s. "That is not a cruise ship," Marcus said, walking back into the room, wiping his hands on a rag. "No," I said, staring at the screen. "That is the Starlight Motel off Interstate 20. I recognized the neon sign reflecting in the window. It costs $40 a night." In the center of the frame, Tiana sat cross-legged on a lumpy mattress. She was still wearing her Gucci tracksuit, but now it looked ridiculous against the backdrop of stained sheets and cheap wood veneer furniture. A greasy pizza box sat open next to her, and she was shoving a slice into her mouth with one hand while scrolling through her phone with the other. Brad was pacing the small room, his tie loosened, his face slick with sweat. He looked like a caged animal. "I cannot believe we are stuck here," Tiana whined through a mouthful of pepperoni. "We are supposed to be sipping champagne on a balcony, Brad. Instead, I am eating gas station pizza in a room that smells like wet dog. When is that guy going to call?" "Stop whining," Brad snapped, stopping his pacing to glare at her. "Do you want the money or not? We have to lay low until the job is done. If we are on a cruise ship, there are cameras everywhere. Here we are ghosts. Once he confirms the job is done, we catch a flight to Mexico in the morning. Then we can live like kings." Tiana huffed, throwing the pizza crust back into the box. "He better call soon. I hate this place. And I hate that we had to use the last of the cash for this dump. You said we would be rich by morning. We will be..." Brad promised, his voice taking on a desperate edge. $5 million, Tiana. Think about it. No more debt. No more hiding. Just us on a beach forever. I watched them, feeling a strange mix of fury and pity. They were pathetic. They had concocted this grand evil plan, but they were executing it from a roadside motel room while eating cheap takeout. They were not criminal masterminds. They were broke, desperate failures who thought murder was an easier solution than getting a job. "They are not on a cruise," I said, my voice flat. "They are 20 miles away, hiding in filth, waiting for a phone call to tell them I am dead so they can pay their tab." Marcus stood beside me, crossing his massive arms. "What is the play, boss? We know where they are. We can have the police pick them up in 20 minutes. "No," I said slowly, a plan forming in my mind. "That is too easy. If the police arrest them now, they will deny everything. They will say the hitman went rogue. They will say they were just having a staycation. I need them to incriminate themselves. I need them to believe they won." I looked at Tiana on the screen, wiping grease from her lips. She wanted a tragedy. She wanted a grieving sister narrative. "Tech," I said, turning away from the screen. "Call Dr. Evans. Tell him I need a favor. We are going to the hospital." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "The hospital?" "Yes," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "Tiana wants to hear that I am dead. Let us give her the next best thing." Let us give her a dying sister. I want to see the look on her face when she thinks she has won. And then I want to see it when I take everything away. Marcus looked at me like I had lost my mind. The police are the logical next step, boss, he argued. We have the hitman. We have the video of them in the motel. That is conspiracy to commit murder. That is 20 years in prison easy. 20 years is not enough, I said, my voice hard. If we arrest them now, they get lawyers. They claim they were coerced. They claim the hitman went rogue. Tiana plays the victim like she always does. She cries in front of a jury and says she was a battered wife forced into a scheme by her husband. She might even walk. No, Marcus. I need her to hang herself. I need her to believe she has won. I need her to stand over my body and make the decision to kill me. Once she signs that paper, once she orders the doctor to pull the plug, there is no defense. There is no going back. I picked up my phone and dialed Dr. Evans. He was the head of neurology at a private clinic in downtown Atlanta, a facility that catered to clients who valued discretion above all else. I had helped fund his expansion last year, when traditional banks thought his research was too risky. He answered on the second ring. Keisha, he said, his voice warm but professional. To what do I owe the pleasure at this hour? I need a bed, doctor, I said, cutting straight to the chase. And I need a performance. I am coming in with symptoms of severe chemical toxicity, mimicking a massive stroke. I need to be intubated. I need to be unresponsive. And I need you to tell my sister that the prognosis is fatal. There was a pause on the line. Keisha, are you in trouble? I am setting a trap, I explained. I need you to call Tiana Wilson. Tell her I was found unconscious by a neighbor. Tell her I am in a coma and likely brain dead. Tell her that as my next of kin, she needs to come immediately to make medical decisions. I heard the rustle of fabric as Dr. Evans likely sat up in bed. This is highly irregular, Keisha. Unethical, even. So is poisoning your sister with heart medication, I countered. She tried to kill me tonight, Evans. I have the toxicology report on my counter. If you do not help me catch her, she will try again, and next time she might succeed. He sighed a long, heavy sound of resignation. I will have the private ICU wing prepped. Come in the back entrance. We will hook you up to the monitors and the ventilator. But Keisha, once we start this, there is no halfway. You have to commit. I am committed, I said. I hung up and turned to my team. Pack it up. Tech, you are coming with us to the hospital. I need cameras in the room and microphones near the bed. I want every whisper recorded. Marcus, you stay with the prisoner until the police are called. Maya, you are coming with me. You are going to be in the observation room with the lawyers. Maya looked up from the corner where she had been watching everything. You want me to watch you die? She asked, her voice small. No, baby, I said, kneeling to hug her. I want you to watch me rise. I want you to see exactly who your parents are, so you never have to wonder if it was your fault. We are going to end this tonight. I walked out of my house, leaving the shattered mug and the poisoned tea behind. I was walking into a nightmare of my own making, but it was the only way to wake up. Tiana wanted a tragedy. I was going to give her a masterpiece. I lay in the hospital bed, hooked up to machines that beeped with a rhythmic artificial pulse. My eyes were open, fixed on a tablet Tech had rigged to the side of the mattress out of sight from the door. Through the hacked camera on Brad's phone, I watched the morning sun filter through the grimy curtains of the Starlight Motel. It was showtime. Dr. Evans made the call on speakerphone from the nurse's station while I listened. I watched Tiana on the screen. She was painting her nails a garish red, looking bored and irritated by the surroundings. When the phone rang, she jumped. She looked at the caller ID and smirked at Brad before putting it on speaker. Ms. Wilson, this is Dr. Evans from Atlanta Private Neurology. Tiana dropped the nail polish bottle on the bedspread. Doctor, is it Keisha? Is she okay? Her voice trembled perfectly. It was a masterclass in manipulation. I am afraid the prognosis is grim, Ms. Wilson, Dr. Evans said, his voice grave. Your sister was found unconscious by a neighbor. She has suffered a catastrophic neurological event, likely due to a severe toxic reaction. She is in a deep coma. You are listed as her emergency contact. We need you here immediately." Tiana gasped a loud theatrical sound that probably echoed into the motel parking lot. "Oh my God! My baby sister! We are coming! We are coming right now!" She hung up and the act dropped instantly. She turned to Brad, a feral grin spreading across her face. "She is a vegetable, Brad. She is not dead, but she is brain dead. That is even better." Brad was shoving his clothes into his suitcase, his movements jerky. "How is that better? I paid for a corpse, Tiana. If she is alive, she can wake up. She can talk." "She is not going to talk, you idiot," Tiana snapped, standing up. "Dr. Evans said catastrophic. That means I get power of attorney. I get to control the accounts. I get to pull the plug and play the tragic hero who had to let her sister go. It is perfect. Plus, if she lingers a few days, we can transfer funds before she is officially declared dead. It is cleaner." I watched them scramble around that dirty room. Tiana began her transformation into the grieving sister. She went to the bathroom mirror and splashed water on her face. Then she took a tissue and carefully smudged her mascara, just enough to look like she had been crying for hours, but not enough to look messy. She changed from her Gucci tracksuit into a somber black dress she must have packed for the cruise dinners. She practiced her expression in the mirror: sadness, shock, devastation. She adjusted her eyebrows, lifting them in the center to feign distress. "Do I look heartbroken?" she asked, turning to Brad. "You look rich," Brad said, zipping his bag. "Let us go. We need to beat the traffic." I switched the feed to the hospital security cameras. 30 minutes later, the rental Range Rover screeched to a halt at the emergency entrance. Tiana practically fell out of the car. She rushed through the automatic doors, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with fake sobs. Brad trailed behind her, looking solemn and appropriately grim, though I noticed he stopped to check his reflection in the glass doors before entering, ensuring his tie was straight. They approached the front desk. "My sister is here," Tiana wailed loudly, drawing stares from the entire lobby. "Keisha Williams. Please tell me she is alive." The receptionist, who had been briefed by Dr. Evans, nodded sympathetically. "She is in the private ICU wing, ma'am. The entire 4th floor. Dr. Evans is waiting for you." Tiana grabbed Brad's arm, squeezing it tight. "The 4th floor," she whispered loud enough for the hidden microphone to catch. "Did you hear that, Brad? She booked the whole floor. That is VIP money. There must be millions left." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, steadying my heart rate. The monitor beside me beeped a little faster, betraying my anger. They were not here to say goodbye. They were here to count their inheritance. I signaled Tech to switch off the tablet and hide it. It was time to play dead. I lay perfectly still in the sterile chill of the private ICU room, my body synced to the mechanical rhythm of the ventilator. The tube in my throat was a choking intrusion, but I focused on the steady beep of the heart monitor, forcing my pulse to remain calm. I had spent years mastering poker faces in boardrooms, but playing dead while my murderer stood over me required a level of control I did not know I possessed. The air smelled of antiseptic and ozone, a clean, sharp scent that was about to be polluted. The double doors burst open with a violent bang that vibrated through the bed frame. Tiana did not just enter a room, she assaulted it. Her perfume, a heavy floral cloying scent, hit me before she did. It was the smell of my childhood, the smell of her hugging me before asking for money, the smell of betrayal. Keisha. "Oh my God, Keisha, no! This cannot be happening!" Her wail was a piercing theatrical shriek that would have shamed a professional mourner. She threw herself onto the side of the bed, her weight pressing down on my legs. She grabbed my hand, her fingers digging into my skin with a desperation that felt entirely performative. Her hands were cold and clammy. She shook me slightly, a violation that sent a spike of adrenaline through my veins. but I kept my muscles loose, my eyes shut tight. My poor baby sister Tiana sobbed, her voice cracking perfectly. "Doctor, tell me there is hope. Tell me she can hear me. She is all I have left. We were so close. We were soulmates." I felt her wet cheek press against my arm. The tears were wet, but they were not for me. They were tears of relief, tears of avarice, tears of victory. She was crying because she thought she had finally won. She was weeping over the jackpot she believed she had just hit. Every sob was a calculation, every tear a down payment on her new life. Behind her, I heard Brad shuffle his feet. He hung back near the door, his presence a dark stain in the room. He was likely scanning for cameras or exits, his cowardice keeping him from approaching the woman he thought he had killed. He did not know that the smoke detector above my head was a high-definition camera lens broadcasting this entire grotesque charade to the observation room 2 floors down. In that dark room sat my attorney, my security team, and my 10-year-old niece. I imagined Maya watching the screen, her small face illuminated by the glow of the monitor. I knew exactly what expression she would be wearing. It would not be sadness, it would be a cold, hard disgust. She was watching her mother, the woman who was supposed to protect her, weep over the sister she had tried to poison just hours before. Maya knew the truth. She knew that every word coming out of Tiana's mouth was a lie. She was witnessing the final death of her childhood, the realization that her mother was a monster wearing a mask of grief. "I love you so much, Keisha," Tiana whispered into my ear, her voice dropping low enough that only I and the hidden microphone could hear. "You were always the strong one. But do not worry, I will take care of everything now. I will take good care of your money." It took every ounce of will I possessed not to open my eyes and strangle her. Her breath was warm on my skin, a physical reminder of her proximity. She stroked my hair with a tenderness that made my skin crawl. It was the touch of a predator claiming its kill. Dr. Evans stepped forward, his voice grave and professional. "I am sorry, Mrs. Wilson. The toxicity caused massive swelling. Her brain activity is non-existent. She is gone." Tiana let out another wail, burying her face in the sheets. But I heard the hitch in her breath, the tiny pause before the scream. It was the sound of a woman suppressing a laugh. She had no idea the corpse she was crying over was counting the seconds until the end of her world. Brad cornered Dr. Evans near the heavy double doors of the ICU room. He looked back over his shoulder to ensure Tiana was still occupied with her performance of the grieving sister before turning his attention fully to the neurologist. I watched through my slitted eyes as Brad wiped a sheen of sweat from his upper lip. He was vibrating with a nervous energy that had nothing to do with sorrow and everything to do with the ticking clock on his debts. He needed certainty, and he needed it right now. "Doc, give it to me straight," Brad whispered, his voice low and urgent. I could hear him perfectly through the hidden microphone taped to the side of the bed frame. The audio feed was crystal clear in the observation room downstairs, but up here it was just a murmur in a quiet room. "Is she, is she coming back from this?" Dr. Evans adjusted his glasses, looking every bit the somber specialist delivering tragic news. He played his part flawlessly. "Mr. Wilson, the toxin levels we found in her blood were extremely high. The lack of oxygen to the brain during the initial seizure. It is significant. The swelling is putting immense pressure on her brainstem." Brad ran a hand through his slicked back hair, disheveling it for the first time. "Significant meaning what? Is she a vegetable? Can she hear us? Can she talk?" That was his real fear. If I could talk, I could accuse him. If I could wake up, his entire house of cards would collapse. He did not care about my quality of life. He cared about his own survival. "It is highly unlikely she will ever regain consciousness." Dr. Evans lied smoothly, his face a mask of professional regret. "Her brainstem function is minimal. Effectively, the machines are the only thing keeping her heart beating. If we were to remove the ventilator, her body would likely shut down within minutes." I heard the sharp intake of breath from Brad. It sounded like the hiss of a deflating tire. Relief. Pure, unadulterated relief washed over him. He was not looking at a dying woman anymore. He was looking at a $5 million check that was about to clear. He looked back at me lying defenseless in the bed, and I could feel the weight of his gaze. It was predatory. He was doing the math in his head, calculating how fast he could get the death certificate and how fast he could get to the bank. So Brad said, lowering his voice even further, leaning in closer to the doctor, If the machine stopped, it would be over, just like that. She would pass very quickly, Dr. Evans confirmed. It would be painless. A mercy, really, considering the extent of the neurological damage, keeping her like this. Well, some would argue it is just prolonging the inevitable. Brad nodded, a twitchy, eager motion. He licked his lips. We need to do what is best for her, he said, his voice suddenly loud enough for the nurse's station to hear. She would not want to live like this. A machine. She was so vibrant. It took every ounce of my control not to flatline the monitor with a spike of rage. Vibrant. He had called me ghetto trash to my sister just yesterday. He had laughed while mixing poison into my tea. Now I was vibrant because I was dying. Now I was a beloved sister-in-law because my death meant his freedom. He walked back over to Tiana, who was dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. He put a hand on her shoulder, squeezing tight. Babe, he said, his tone urgent, pressing. The doctor says. He says it is bad. Real bad. There is no coming back from this tea. Tiana looked up, her makeup artfully smudged. How bad? She is gone, T. Brad said, and I could hear the excitement leaking into his voice, the desperate hunger for the payout. The machines are just stalling. We have to make a decision. For Keisha. We have to let her go. The door opened again, admitting a man in a charcoal suit who looked like he billed by the second. It was Mr. Henderson, my corporate attorney, though to Tiana. He was introduced simply as the executor of my estate. He carried a leather briefcase that looked heavy with expectation. He walked to the foot of the bed, his expression unreadable, placing the briefcase on the tray table with a solid thud that made Brad jump. Ms. Wilson, Mr. Henderson, said, his voice smooth and authoritative. I am sorry we have to meet under these circumstances. However, given the gravity of your sister's condition and the absence of a spouse, the hospital needs a legal directive to proceed. We also need to execute the emergency transfer of assets to cover the mounting medical bills. Tiana perked up at the word assets. She dabbed her dry eyes with the tissue one last time and straightened her posture. Of course, she sniffed. I want to do whatever is right for Keisha. What do I need to sign? Henderson opened the briefcase and slid a stack of documents toward her. The paper at the top was bold and unmistakable. Emergency medical directive and power of attorney. Below that was the clause regarding the immediate liquidation of accounts to the beneficiary. This document grants you full authority over Keisha Medical Care, Henderson explained, handing her a heavy fountain pen, including the decision to terminate life support in cases of irreversible brain damage. It also grants you immediate access to her accounts to settle her affairs. Tiana took the pen. She did not read the fine print. She did not ask about second opinions. She did not hesitate. Her eyes locked onto the signature line, like a heat-seeking missile. Brad hovered over her shoulder, practically vibrating. Just sign it, T, he urged, his voice tight. Do it for Keisha. Let her rest. Tiana nodded, solemnity plastered on her face like a bad mask. You are right, she said. She would not want to suffer. She pressed the pen to the paper. The scratching sound of the nib filled the silence of the room, louder to my ears than the steady beep of the monitor. She signed her name with a flourish. Then she moved to the next page. The checkbox for terminate life support stared up at her. She checked it with a decisive slash of ink. It is done, she said, handing the clipboard back to Henderson. Please, doctor, turn them off. Let my sister find peace. Henderson took the papers, checking the signature. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. This is all we needed. Tiana leaned over me one last time. She brushed a stray hair from my forehead, her touch lingering. From the outside, it looked like a loving final goodbye. A sister bidding farewell to her best friend. But then she lowered her head until her lips were brushing my ear. Her breath was hot and smelled of the stale coffee she had chugged in the waiting room. "Die, you miserable bitch," she whispered, the venom pure and unfiltered. "Just die and set us free. We need that money and you are in the way. Do us both a favor and stop breathing." She pulled back, tears glistening in her eyes for the benefit of the doctor. "I love you, Keisha," she said loudly for the room to hear. "Goodbye, my angel." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest, turning my blood to ice. She had signed the paper. She had given the order. She had whispered her confession. The trap was sprung. The evidence was irrefutable. She thought she was signing a check, but she had just signed a confession. I waited for the signal. It was time to wake up. The elevator doors pinged shut, cutting off the view of the nurses' station and the solemn faces of the medical staff. The moment the metal doors sealed us in the silence of the shaft, Tiana dropped the grieving sister act like a heavy coat on a hot day. She slumped against the back wall, but not from exhaustion. She let out a long breath that turned into a giggle, a high-pitched manic sound that bounced off the steel walls. "We did it," she whispered, her eyes wide and glittering in the fluorescent light. "We actually did it, Brad. She is gone. Or she will be in a few minutes. Did you see the doctor face? He bought every single second of it. I should win an Academy Award." Brad loosened his tie, grinning like a wolf who had just raided the henhouse. "Forget the award, babe. We just won the lottery. $5 million. Do you know what we can do with that? We are not just out of debt. We are set for life." They walked out of the hospital entrance, arm in arm. To the casual observer, they looked like a devastated couple clinging to each other for support in their darkest hour. But if you looked closer, you would see the spring in their step, the tightness of their grip that was not about comfort, but about victory. They did not walk to the car. They marched. They were soldiers returning from a war they thought they had won, without firing a single shot. The drive to my house in South Fulton was a celebration. Brad drove the rental Range Rover with a new aggression weaving through traffic as if the laws of the road no longer applied to him. Tiana sat in the passenger seat scrolling through her phone. She was not looking up funeral homes. She was looking up first-class flights to Costa Rica and luxury villas with infinity pools. They discussed my death with the casual detachment of someone discussing a business transaction. When they pulled up to my modest brick ranch house, they did not park on the street like they had the day before. This time, Brad pulled right into the driveway, blocking the garage. They felt entitled to the space now. In their minds, the deed was already in their names. Tiana stepped out of the car and looked at the house, not with disdain, but with the appraising eye of a landlord. She dug into her purse and pulled out a key. It was a spare I had given her 5 years ago for emergencies back when I still thought family meant something. She had never used it to check on me when I was sick. She had never used it to bring me soup or offer comfort. She was using it now to rob my corpse before it was even cold. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. They stepped into the cool silence of my living room. The air was still holding the faint scent of the cleaning products I used. It felt like a violation. My sanctuary, my safe space was being invaded by the very people who had tried to destroy me. They did not take off their shoes. They did not hesitate. "Well," Tiana said, looking around with a sneer, "let us get to work. We need to find the financial records, the deeds, and any cash she kept in the house. The funeral can wait. We need to secure the bag first." Brad rubbed his hands together, his eyes scanning the room. "Where do you think she keeps the good stuff?" "The master bedroom, right?" Tiana nodded, marching toward the hallway. "Definitely." Keisha was paranoid. "She probably has a safe hidden in the closet. Let us go crack it open." They moved through my home, touching my things, opening my drawers, stripping away the last layers of my privacy. They had no idea that the house was not empty. They had no idea that every step they took was being watched. They thought they were the new owners, but they were just rats walking deeper into the maze. Tiana did not mourn. She looted. I watched through the hidden camera lens positioned inside the smoke detector as my sister tore through my master bedroom like a hurricane. She ripped clothes from hangers, throwing my business suits and silk blouses onto the floor in a heap. She was not looking for sentimental keepsakes. She was not looking for a photo album or a favorite sweater to remember me by. She was looking for value. She pulled drawers out of the dresser, dumping their contents onto the carpet, kicking aside my personal items with her expensive heels. "Where is it?" she muttered to herself, her eyes scanning the room with feverish intensity. "I know she has a stash. You do not run a business like hers without skimming a little off the top." She moved to the walk-in closet, pushing aside the racks of winter coats, until she found what she was looking for. The safe. It was a heavy, digital model bolted to the floor in the back corner. I had installed it years ago not to hide things from thieves, but to hide my success from my family. Tiana dropped to her knees in front of it. She did not look for a combination paper. She did not call a locksmith. She typed in 4 numbers with confident arrogance. 0815, her own birthday. The safe beeped a happy green tone and the heavy door clicked open. I had set that code 5 years ago, knowing that if Tiana ever tried to rob me, her narcissism would lead her to try her own special day first. It was a test she had failed spectacularly. Tiana gasped as the door swung wide. Inside sat the physical proof of the empire I had built in silence. Stacked neatly were 3 orange Hermes boxes and several velvet jewelry pouches. These were my investments, my rewards to myself that I never wore around her. "Jackpot!" she squealed, her voice cracking with pure greed. "Brad, get in here. You have to see this." She did not wait for him. She tore the lid off the top box, revealing a black Birkin 30 in matte alligator leather with gold hardware. It was a bag worth more than the car she had arrived in. Tiana lifted it out, cradling it like a newborn baby. She rubbed her cheek against the leather, closing her eyes in ecstasy. Then she reached for the velvet pouches. She poured the contents into her palm. A diamond tennis bracelet, a pair of 3-carat stud earrings, a platinum necklace dripping with emeralds. She did not hesitate. She slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, watching the diamonds catch the light. She fumbled with the clasp of the necklace, fastening it around her neck. She put the earrings in, discarding her own cheap hoops on the floor. She stood up and walked to the full-length mirror, posing with the bag on her arm and the jewels at her throat. She looked at her reflection and smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It was not a smile of gratitude or surprise. It was a smile of ownership. She did not see my things. She saw her future. She spun around, admiring the way the emeralds looked against her skin, completely forgetting that the woman who owned them was supposedly lying dead in a hospital bed a few miles away. "I look good," she whispered to her reflection. "I look like money. Finally." I watched from the safety of the observation room, feeling a cold knot of satisfaction in my stomach. She had taken the bait. She was wearing the evidence. She had adorned herself in the spoils of war before the battle was even over. She looked like a queen, but I knew the truth. She was just a scavenger picking at bones, and she was about to choke. Tiana did not stop at playing dress-up. She needed an audience. She needed witnesses to her ascension. She sat on the edge of my king-sized bed, the black Birkin resting on her lap like a pet, and unlocked her phone. She was not calling family members to break the bad news. She was calling her contacts list to announce her arrival. She was turning a tragedy into a launch party for her new life. First, she dialed Pastor Jenkins, the head of the megachurch in Buckhead, where she only showed up on Easter. Her voice shifted instantly into a somber, reverent tone, but her fingers were busy stroking the alligator leather of the bag. "Pastor, it is Tiana Wilson. Yes, it is terrible news. Keisha is... She is transitioning. The doctors say it is a matter of hours. We are holding a prayer vigil tonight at her estate in South Fulton. Yes, the large brick one on the hill. We want to bless the house and bless the legacy she is leaving behind, specifically the transfer of stewardship." She hung up and winked at her reflection. "Stewardship," she whispered. "That sounds better than cashing out, doesn't it?" Then came the calls that really mattered to her. The frenemies, the women from the socialite circles who had frozen her out when the rumors of Brad's debts started swirling. Tiana dialed Tiffany, the head of the homeowners association who had snubbed her at the last gala. "Tiffany. Darling, it is Tiana. I know it has been a while. Listen, something tragic has happened to my sister, but I need to be strong. We are hosting a repast tonight, a celebration of life and legacy. You simply must come and see the property." I had no idea Keisha was sitting on this much equity. It is a fortress. And of course, as the sole beneficiary, I will be looking for advice on how to manage such a substantial portfolio. We will be serving champagne. Please bring the girls. She made call after call. She invited her real estate agent. She invited Brad's old investors. She invited people she barely knew. She was not gathering mourners. She was building a court. She wanted everyone to see her standing in my house wearing my diamonds, holding the keys to my kingdom. She was rebranding herself from the broke, desperate housewife to the wealthy heiress before my heart had even stopped beating. Brad walked in looking nervous. "Tiana, are you sure about this?" he asked, wiping his forehead. "A party, tonight. She is not even dead yet, technically. The body is not even here. People might think it is tacky." Tiana laughed, a cold, hard sound. "It is not tacky, Brad. It is networking. If we wait until the funeral, the momentum is gone. People love a tragedy, but they love money more. I need them to see us in this house owning it. I need to solidify our status before anyone starts asking questions. By the time the death certificate is signed, everyone will already accept that this is our house and our money. It is psychology." She stood up, smoothing the front of her black dress, which was now accessorized with $50,000 of my jewelry. "Now go call that catering company you used for the failed IPO launch. Tell them I want high-end hors d'oeuvres, lobster sliders, truffle fries. And tell them to rush it. We have guests arriving at 7. I watched from the monitor, marveling at the sheer speed of her disrespect. She was hosting a party on my grave. She was using my death as a networking event to climb the social ladder. She had absolutely no shame, and that was exactly what was going to destroy her. She was inviting an audience to watch her moment of triumph, but she did not realize she was actually inviting witnesses to her downfall. By 7:30, the driveway of my quiet South Fulton home looked like a luxury car dealership. The people who had turned their noses up at my neighborhood earlier were now parking their Mercedes and BMWs on my lawn, eager to get a look inside the house of the tragedy. Tiana had pulled it off. She had turned a death watch into the social event of the season. I watched the feed from the observation room, my hands clenched so tight, my fingernails dug crescents into my palms. My sister stood in the center of my sunken living room, holding a crystal flute of my best vintage champagne. The black Birkin bag was conspicuously perched on the mantelpiece behind her like a trophy, or perhaps an idol she expected them to worship. She was working the room with the grace of a seasoned politician. She had gathered a circle of influence around her, including Pastor Jenkins Tiffany from the HOA and a few of Brad's nervous-looking investors. They leaned in, listening intently as she lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know I tried to help her," Tiana said, shaking her head sadly, the emerald earrings catching the light. "Keisha was a sweet girl, but she had demons. Financial demons. She projected this image of success with the hair business, but the reality was messy." Tiffany gasped, clutching her pearls. "What do you mean, messy?" She seemed so put together. "Smoke and mirrors." Tiana sighed, taking a delicate sip of champagne. She was in over her head. Predatory loans, gambling debts, maxed-out credit cards. The house is actually underwater. The bank was going to foreclose next week. That is probably what triggered the stroke. The stress of it all finally broke her. I felt a surge of hot indignation. I had zero debt. My house was paid for in cash. My credit score was perfect. But Tiana was systematically dismantling my reputation to cover her own tracks. If she painted me as a financial disaster, no one would question why she was liquidating my assets so quickly. They would think she was just cleaning up my mess. "So what happens now?" Pastor Jenkins asked, looking concerned. "Does the estate go to the bank?" "Oh, heavens no," Tiana said, straightening her spine to look like a martyr. "I could not let my sister's name be dragged through the mud like that. Brad and I are stepping in. We are going to use our own personal savings to settle her debts. We will sell the property, of course, but any proceeds will go to paying off her creditors. It is a huge financial blow to us, especially with our own investments tied up, but family is family. I have to protect her dignity even in death." "You are a saint," Tiana Tiffany cooed, touching her arm. "A true saint. Most people would just walk away." "I am just doing what a big sister does," Tiana said, forcing a brave smile. "I will take on the burden. I always have." Brad was standing by the bar, nodding along vigorously. "It is the right thing to do," he chimed in. "We just want to close this chapter quickly, sell the assets, pay the debts, and let Keisha rest in peace." The room murmured with approval. They looked at Tiana with admiration, seeing a wealthy, benevolent sister sacrificing her own fortune to save a fallen sibling. They had no idea they were looking at a broke thief, wearing stolen jewelry lying through her teeth to justify stealing a dead woman's fortune. It was the most masterful lie I had ever heard, and for a moment I was terrified that she might actually get away with it. She had the crowd in the palm of her hand, and she was squeezing tight. While Tiana was busy canonizing herself in the living room, painting a picture of selfless sacrifice, Brad was in the den conducting a very different kind of sermon. He had found my private stash of Blue Label scotch, a bottle I had been saving for a special occasion, and he was pouring it into heavy tumblers like it was tap water. The relief of the last few hours, combined with the adrenaline of the heist and the alcohol on an empty stomach, had made him sloppy. He had cornered 3 men near the bookshelf. I recognized them immediately. They were not friends. They were the sharks, the hard money lenders he had been dodging for months, the men who had threatened to break his legs just last week. Now, however, Brad was not cowering. He was leaning against my mahogany desk chest, puffed out, swirling the amber liquid in his glass with a grin that threatened to split his face. He looked like a man who had just pulled off the bluff of the century. "Gentlemen," Brad slurred slightly, his voice booming a little too loud for a house of mourning. "I know you have been patient. I know there were some liquidity issues last quarter. But I told you I had a plan. I told you I always land on my feet." One of the investors, a man with a scar over his eyebrow named Vance, looked unimpressed. "You have told us a lot of things, Brad. But the wire transfer never seems to show up. We are tired of plans. We want cash." Brad laughed, clapping Vance on the shoulder with a familiarity that made the other man stiffen. "That is just it, Vance. The cash is secured. It is a done deal. I have a guaranteed influx of capital hitting the account by Tuesday morning, 5 million liquid, no strings attached." He took a large gulp of the scotch, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "It is the seed money for the Alpha project. We are going to double it in 6 months. I am letting you guys in on the ground floor because you stuck by me. But you have to sign on now. Once the money clears, I am closing the round." I watched from the monitor, disgusted by his arrogance. He was selling shares in a ghost project, funded by the blood money he thought he was about to collect. He was literally betting my life against his debt. "Where is this capital coming from?" Brad Vance asked, his eyes narrowing. "You said you were tapped out yesterday. Now you have 5 million dropping out of the sky. Did you win the lottery?" Brad winked, a slow, conspiring gesture that made my skin crawl. "Let us just say a family investment matured. It is an inheritance situation. Very tragic, of course, but financially very convenient. The timing could not have been more perfect. It really saved my bacon." He clinked his glass against Vance's glass, oblivious to the fact that he was essentially admitting to benefiting from a tragedy that had not even been officially confirmed yet. He was celebrating my death before my body was even cold, using the promise of my life insurance to buy himself more time with loan sharks. He was so drunk on his own perceived genius that he did not notice the investors exchanging skeptical glances. He thought he was the king of the world, but he was just a drunk fool standing on a trapdoor. The celebration was in full swing inside, with champagne corks popping and laughter echoing off the walls, but Tiana suddenly stopped mid-sentence. She looked around the room, realizing a crucial prop was missing from her stage set. She had the house, she had the jewelry, and she had the sympathetic guests, but she had forgotten the grieving niece. It was a lapse in her carefully curated image of the benevolent matriarch. She excused herself from a conversation with the Homeowners Association president and marched out the front door, her heels clicking angrily on the pavement. She headed straight for the rental Range Rover parked in the driveway. She yanked the back door open. Maya was sitting there in the dark, exactly where she had been left hours ago. Tiana had been so consumed with looting the master bedroom and organizing the catering that she had completely forgotten to let her own 10-year-old daughter out of the car. Maya did not look up. She was staring at her hands, her face a mask of indifference. "Get out!" Tiana hissed, reaching in and grabbing Maya by the upper arm. Her grip was tight enough to bruise. "You are embarrassing me. People are going to ask where you are, and I cannot tell them I left you in the car like a forgotten bag of groceries." She hauled the child out onto the driveway and dragged her toward the house. But she did not take her through the front door where the guests could see this rough handling. She pulled her around to the side entrance that led into the laundry room. Tiana kicked the door open and shoved Maya inside. The room was cluttered with the catering staff supplies, but Tiana did not care. She reached into a plastic bag she had tossed on the dryer earlier and pulled out a faded black dress that looked 2 sizes too small. "Put this on," she ordered, throwing the garment at Maya's face. "And fix your hair. You look like a street rat. I want you to sit in the corner of the living room on that little stool by the fireplace. Do not speak. Do not ask for food. Do not look at anyone. Just sit there and look sad. If I see you breathing too loud or drawing attention to yourself, I will give you something to actually cry about later." Maya changed into the dress without a word. It was tight and scratchy, a stark contrast to the silk and velvet Tiana was wearing. Tiana checked her reflection one last time, oblivious to the irony, then grabbed Maya's hand with a fake gentleness as they walked into the main hallway. She deposited Maya on the stool like she was placing a vase and immediately turned her back to rejoin the party, leaving her daughter isolated in the shadows. Maya sat perfectly still, observing the room with those sharp, intelligent eyes. Suddenly, a shadow fell over her. She looked up to see an older woman standing there holding a plate of food. It was Aunt May, a distant cousin of Keisha, who had always been the quiet observer at family gatherings. Aunt May wore a simple navy suit and a hat with a small veil, but her eyes were sharp and kind. She looked at Tiana, laughing across the room, then looked down at Maya. She did not say a word at first. She simply blocked Tiana's view with her body and slipped a warm slider and a napkin into Maya's hand. "Eat," child Aunt May whispered, her voice barely audible over the music. "And keep your head up. I saw what she did. The devil is dancing tonight, but the Lord is watching. And so am I." She gave Maya a wink that was full of conspiracy and hidden strength. Maya took a bite of the food, her eyes locking with Aunt May. For the first time all night, she did not feel alone. She knew she had an ally in the room, and the game was far from over. Tiana walked to the center of the room and tapped a silver spoon against her crystal flute. The sharp, clear chimes cut through the murmur of conversation and the clinking of silverware, silencing the room instantly. All eyes turned to her. She basked in the attention, letting the moment stretch out. She adjusted the stolen diamond necklace at her throat, making sure it caught the light of the chandelier just right. Brad handed her a wireless microphone that he had connected to the house sound system. She gripped it with a manicured hand, her knuckles white, not from grief, but from the sheer thrill of the power she now held. My dearest friends and family. She began, her voice trembling with a practiced fragility. Thank you for being here tonight. I know this was short notice. I know we are all in shock. But I felt it was important for us to gather here in her sanctuary, to pray, to support one another in this dark hour. She paused, looking down at the expensive Persian rug, as if overcome with emotion before lifting her chin bravely. I just received another update from Dr. Evans at the hospital. The news is final. My sweet baby sister Keisha is in her last moments. The machines are the only thing holding her here, and as her family, we have made the difficult decision to let her go. She will be joining the angels before the sun rises tomorrow. A collective gasp went through the room. Some of the church ladies dabbed their eyes with handkerchiefs. Tiana let the reaction settle before hardening her expression into something that looked like resolve. But Keisha would not want us to despair. She was a builder, a dreamer, and she built an empire that supports so many people. There have been rumors swirling tonight about the state of her affairs, about debts and mismanagement. And while some of those rumors are true, I want to put your minds at ease. She took a step forward, her voice gaining strength, losing the tremble completely. She was no longer the grieving sister. She was the conqueror. As Keisha's sole surviving relative and the legal guardian of her estate, I am stepping forward to carry this torch. I am officially announcing that effective immediately, I will be assuming full control of Keisha Beauty and the entire real estate portfolio. She swept her arm across the room as if claiming the air itself. I know it is a heavy burden. I know it will take work to clean up the financial mess she left behind. But Brad and I are committed. We are going to restructure. We are going to expand. We are going to take what she started and turn it into the global brand she never had the vision to create herself. This is not the end of a legacy. It is the beginning of a dynasty. My dynasty. She raised her glass high, the champagne bubbling gold in the light. So please raise your glasses. Not to death, but to new beginnings. To the future of this company, and to the family that is stepping up to save it. To us. Brad cheered loudly from the bar, raising his whiskey glass. To us, he bellowed, his face flushed with triumph. The guests hesitated for a fraction of a second, unsure of the protocol for toasting a hostile takeover at a death watch, but the momentum of Tiana confidence swept them up. Slowly, glasses were raised. Murmurs of "hear, hear" rippled through the crowd. Tiana smiled. It was a wide, predatory grin that showed all her teeth. She stood there in the center of my home, wearing my diamonds, drinking my wine, and telling the world that I was nothing more than a stepping stone for her ambition. She truly believed she was the queen of the castle. She did not hear the front door unlocking behind her. The applause was still rippling through the room, warm and validating. Tiana lowered her champagne flute, a flush of victory coloring her cheeks. She felt invincible. She had successfully spun a narrative of tragedy into a tale of triumph, and the most influential people in her circle were buying it hook, line, and sinker. Brad was grinning from the bar, raising a bottle of expensive scotch in a silent salute to his wife, Genius. The soft jazz playlist she had queued up on her phone to set the mood was playing gently in the background, filling the silence between congratulations. Then, without warning, the music cut out. It was not a fade out. It was a sharp, abrupt silence that made several guests look up toward the ceiling speakers in confusion. For a split second, the only sound in the room was the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. Tiana frowned, tapping the screen of her phone, which was sitting on the marble island, connected via Bluetooth to the entire house entertainment system. Technical difficulties, she joked lightly, flashing a charming smile to the room. Even technology is overwhelmed by the emotion of the night. But before the polite laughter could fade, a sound erupted from the speakers that made everyone jump. It was a ringtone. Not just any ringtone, but the specific jarring default alarm tone Tiana had assigned to family emergencies. Because her phone was synced to the high-definition projector she had set up to display a slideshow of photos, the caller ID was not just on her small screen. It was blasted onto the 60-inch canvas drop sheet hanging above the fireplace. The name pulsed in massive white letters against a stark black background. Keisha. The room went instantly silent. It was a vacuum of sound, a sudden and violent absence of noise. The air seemed to be sucked out of the space, leaving everyone frozen in a tableau of shock. A woman in the front row dropped her fork and it clattered against her china plate, sounding like a gunshot in the quiet. Tiana's face drained of all color. The glass of champagne slipped from her numbness fingers. It hit the hardwood floor and shattered, spraying shards of crystal and golden liquid across her ankles. But she did not flinch. She did not look down. She could not tear her eyes away from the screen. Keisha Brad stammered from the bar, his voice cracking. He looked at the screen, then at Tiana, then back at the screen, as if trying to make the letters rearrange themselves into something that made sense. But she is. The doctor said she was. The phone continued to ring. The sound was amplified by the surround sound speakers booming through the house like the trumpet of judgment. It was relentless, demanding. Every ring felt like a physical blow. The guests began to exchange terrified glances. They looked from the screen to the grieving sister who had just claimed the caller was brain dead. The murmurs started low and confused. "I thought she passed away," someone whispered. "Is this a prank?" another voice asked, sounding disturbed. Tiana stared at the name. Her mind was racing frantically, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was Dr. Evans calling from Keisha's phone to confirm the time of death. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe it was a ghost. Her hands shook violently as she reached for the phone on the counter. She wanted to decline the call, to make the name disappear, to stop the noise that was tearing her victory apart. But she was paralyzed. The name on the screen was impossible. The woman on the other end of that line was supposed to be a vegetable waiting for the plug to be pulled. "Answer it!" a voice called out from the back of the room. It was Aunt May standing near the shadows. "Answer it, Tiana. If she is gone, then who is calling?" Tiana swallowed hard, her throat dry as dust. She looked at Brad for help, but he was cowering against the liquor cabinet, looking like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. She was alone. The ringing continued, loud and accusing, echoing off the walls of the house she had stolen. She reached out a trembling finger and pressed the green button. The audio feed crackled to life over the speakers. "Hello," Tiana whispered, her voice barely audible. The voice that answered was not a doctor. It was not a nurse. It was the voice of the woman who owned the house. "Hello, Sister Keisha," voice boomed through the speakers, clear and cold as ice. "I hope you saved me some champagne. I hate missing a party, especially one in my honor." The silence in the room was absolute. It was not the silence of peace, but the silence of a held breath, of a collective heart stopping in a chest. The name Keisha burned on the projection screen, a digital ghost haunting the festivities. Tiana stood frozen, her hand hovering over the phone on the marble island. Her mind was frantically spinning, trying to weave a logical thread through the impossibility of the moment. It had to be the hospital. It had to be Dr. Evans calling from Keisha's personal device, because he could not find the file. Yes, that was it. It was just a bureaucratic detail, a final confirmation of death. She forced her trembling finger down onto the green icon. The connection clicked open with a sharp burst of static that hissed through the surround sound speakers, making several guests flinch. "Dr. Evans," Tiana whispered, her voice shaking so hard it was barely intelligible. Is it over? Did she pass?" For a long, agonizing second, there was only the sound of breathing on the other end. It was slow, deliberate breathing, deep and steady. It was not the shallow rattle of a dying patient or the hurried tone of a busy doctor. It was the calm, controlled respiration of a predator. "No, Tiana," the voice boomed, filling every corner of the room, vibrating through the floorboards. "It is not over. It is just beginning." Tiana recoiled as if she had been slapped. She grabbed the edge of the counter to steady herself. Her eyes darted around the room, seeking an explanation, seeking a way out. The guests were staring at the speakers, their faces masks of horror. Brad had slid down the wall in the corner, his hands over his ears like a child trying to block out thunder. Keisha. Tiana gasped the name tearing out of her throat. But you are... the machines. The laugh that followed was dark and rich, devoid of any warmth. It echoed through the house, mocking her. You really thought a little poison and a signature could get rid of me. You thought you could sign a paper and inherit my life. You forgot one thing, Tiana. You forgot that I built this house. I know every wire. I know every camera. And I know exactly what you did. The voice hardened, dropping the amusement and turning into pure steel. I see you are drinking my vintage champagne. I see you are wearing my diamonds. You are throwing a party on my grave before I am even in it. Tell me, sister. The party looks so fun. Why did you not wait for me to come back? Why did you start the celebration without the guest of honor? Tiana's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She was shaking violently now, the phone slipping from her sweaty fingers. The reality was crashing down on her. Keisha was not dead. She was watching. She was listening. She was here. I am coming home, Tiana, Keisha whispered, and the sound was like a cold wind blowing through a graveyard. And I am bringing the fire. Suddenly, a loud mechanical clunk echoed from the basement. It was the sound of the main breaker being thrown. In an instant, the entire house plunged into absolute pitch blackness. The projection screen died. The music died. The lights in the chandelier winked out. The darkness was total, heavy and suffocating. A scream ripped through the room, followed by the sound of glass shattering and bodies colliding in the panic. Tiana stood paralyzed in the dark, the smell of her own fear rising to choke her. She was no longer the queen of the castle. She was a rat in a trap, and the lights had just been turned out. Panic erupted in the void. Screams and the sound of breaking glass filled the air. Tiana stood frozen, gripping the marble island like a lifeline. She was blind in the darkness, but the sound of her own heartbeat was deafening in her ears. She tried to move to find Brad, but her legs refused to obey. The air felt heavy, charged with a static electricity that raised the hair on her arms. Then a beam of pure white light cut through the gloom. The projector hummed to life. The 60-inch screen above the fireplace, which had been displaying a somber slideshow of my childhood photos, flickered. The image stabilized. It was not a picture. It was a video. And it was played at maximum volume. The first scene was the kitchen. It was stamped with yesterday's date. The angle was high, taken from the motion sensor in the smoke detector. The image was crystal clear. Brad stood over the teapot, shaking a packet of white powder into the steaming liquid. Tiana stood beside him, watching with a critical eye. Make sure it dissolves, Brad. We cannot have her tasting grit, the Tiana on the screen said. Her voice was casual, as if she were discussing a recipe rather than a murder weapon. A gasp went through the room. The guests huddled in the darkness, illuminated only by the ghostly glow of the screen, stared in horror. The video cut. Now it was a dark room. A man with a bruised face sat tied to a chair, his eyes wide with terror. My voice spoke from behind the camera, calm and commanding. Who hired you? The man on the screen swallowed hard. Brad Wilson. He said to make it look like a robbery if the poison did not work. Brad let out a strangled whimper from his corner. He tried to run toward the back door, but tripped over an ottoman in the dark, crashing to the floor. No one moved to help him. The video cut again. This time it was the hospital room. The timestamp was from this morning. Tiana was weeping over my body, her performance Oscar-worthy. The guests watched as Mr. Henderson handed her the clipboard. They watched her eyes light up as she saw the words, Immediate asset liquidation. They watched her sign the Do Not Resuscitate order with a flourish. But it was the audio that destroyed her. The camera zoomed in as Tiana leaned close to my ear. The microphones I had planted picked up every whisper. Die, you miserable bitch, the Tiana on the screen hissed, her face twisted in a sneer. Just die and set us free. We need that money. The video ended on a freeze frame of Tiana smiling at her reflection in the hospital window wearing my stolen jewelry. The silence shattered. It was replaced by a roar of collective outrage. The guests who moments ago were raising toast to Tiana now raised their phones. Dozens of screens lit up the dark room like fireflies. They were not calling for help. They were hitting the Go Live button on Instagram and TikTok. Murderer, someone shouted from the back. She tried to kill her own sister, Tiffany screamed, holding her phone up to capture Tiana's face. I am live streaming this. Everyone needs to see this. Tiana stood in the spotlight of the projector, exposed and naked in her guilt. She held up her hands, trying to block the light, trying to hide from the accusations. But there was nowhere to hide. The evidence was 40 feet tall and playing on a loop. The murmurs turned to jeers. The admiration turned to hatred. She looked out at the sea of glowing phone screens recording her downfall, and for the first time in her life, she realized she could not talk her way out of this. The mask had not just slipped, it had been ripped off. The video on the projection screen looped again, showing Tiana's twisted face whispering her death wish, but no one was watching it anymore. The chaotic noise of the room, the jeers, the accusations, and the frantic questions died instantly as the heavy front doors of the estate swung open. They did not just open. They were thrown wide with a force that rattled the hinges, hitting the stops with a thunderous boom that silenced the house. The main foyer lights blazed to life, flooding the room with a brilliance that hurt the eyes after the darkness. And there, standing in the center of the doorway, was not a ghost. It was the lady of the house. I stepped across the threshold. I was not wearing a hospital gown. I was not wearing a shroud. I was wearing a bespoke white tuxedo suit with sharp satin lapels, a garment I had commissioned for my company 10-year anniversary gala. It was pristine, luminous, and commanding. Against the backdrop of the dark night outside, I looked like an avenging angel. My hair was pulled back in a severe, flawless bun, and my makeup was sharp enough to cut glass. I did not look like a victim. I looked like the CEO of a multi-million-dollar empire coming to audit the books. I was not alone. Flanking me on the left was Sheriff Miller, his hand resting on his holster, his face grim. On my right were 2 agents from the FBI, clad in their signature windbreakers, the bold yellow letters distinct against the navy blue fabric. Behind them, Marcus and his security team formed a wall of muscle blocking any exit. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Guests who had been eating my food and drinking my wine scrambled backward, knocking over chairs to get out of my path. They pressed themselves against the walls, desperate to distance themselves from the woman standing by the fireplace. Tiana stood alone in the center of the sunken living room. She was trembling so violently that the stolen diamond necklace at her throat rattled against her collarbone. In her panic during the blackout, she had grabbed a glass of heavy red wine from a passing tray, clutching it like a lifeline. When she saw me, her brain simply short-circuited. Her fingers went numb. The crystal goblet slipped from her grasp. It fell in slow motion, tumbling through the air, before shattering against the hardwood floor. The dark red liquid exploded outward, splashing up onto the hem of the expensive black dress she had stolen from my closet. The stain bloomed instantly, a jagged crimson mark that looked like a fresh gunshot wound on the fabric. Keisha, she breathed the word, barely a ghost of a sound. I walked down the steps into the living room, the sound of my white heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. I stopped 3 feet away from her. I looked at the wine staining her dress, then I looked up at her terrified eyes. "You have a little something on your dress, Tiana," I said, my voice calm and conversational. "It is a shame. That was vintage Merlot, and that was a $4,000 dress. But do not worry. Where you are going, the state provides the wardrobe, and orange is definitely your color." I turned to the room, scanning the faces of the friends and investors who had been so eager to bury me. "Get out," I said softly. No one moved. "I said, get out!" I roared, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Unless you want to be named as accomplices in a federal conspiracy investigation, you will vacate my property in 10 seconds. The stampede was instantaneous, but Tiana could not run. She was frozen pinned by the weight of her own sins and the cold steel gaze of the sister she thought she had killed. Brad did not wait to see his wife arrested. He did not look back at the woman he had promised to take to Costa Rica. The moment the FBI agents swarmed the living room, Brad realized his golden parachute had just turned into an anchor. Self-preservation kicked in with violent force. While the room was fixated on the standoff between me and Tiana, Brad dropped his whiskey glass on the carpet and bolted toward the kitchen. He was fast fueled by the desperate adrenaline of a con man running out of road. He shoved past a waiter knocking a tray of hors d'oeuvres to the floor and scrambled over the spilled sliders. He made it to the hallway that led to the back service entrance. He could see the door. It was 10 feet away. Freedom was just on the other side. If he could get to the woods, he could disappear. He could hitchhike. He could start over. He reached for the handle, his fingers inches from the brass knob. Suddenly a figure stepped out of the shadows of the laundry room. It was not a federal agent. It was not a security guard. It was Aunt May. She stood barely 5 feet tall in her navy Sunday suit and church hat, but she blocked the hallway like a boulder. Brad sneered at her. He saw a frail old woman standing between him and his escape. "Move, old woman," he shouted, lunging forward to shove her aside. It was the last mistake he made as a free man. Aunt May did not flinch. She did not step back. As Brad reached out to push her, she stepped in. She grabbed the lapels of his expensive Italian suit with hands that had spent 50 years wringing out mops and disciplining unruly children. Her grip was iron. "You are not going anywhere, boy," she said, her voice low and dangerous. Using his own momentum against him, she pivoted on her heel. It was a move she must have learned in a self-defense class, or perhaps just from a lifetime of handling heavy loads. She swept his legs out from under him and slammed him into the tile floor with a bone-rattling thud. Brad hit the ground hard, the air whooshing out of his lungs. He tried to scramble up, gasping for breath, but Aunt May pressed the heel of her sensible orthopedic shoe squarely onto the center of his chest, pinning him to the floor. "Stay down," she commanded, pointing a finger in his face. "You made a mess in this house, and now you are going to pay for it." Before Brad could even wheeze a protest, the back door burst open. 2 FBI agents in tactical vests poured into the hallway, guns drawn. They did not need to tackle him. Aunt May had already done the work. They hauled Brad to his feet, spinning him around and slamming him against the refrigerator. The cold steel of handcuffs clicked tight around his wrists, cutting into his skin. Brad struggled uselessly, his face pressed against the stainless steel door. "Get off me. You have nothing on me. I want a lawyer." Special Agent Ross stepped forward, holding up a badge. He looked at Brad with utter contempt. "Brad Wilson, also known as Brad Miller," he announced, his voice cutting through the panic. "You are under arrest for interstate securities, fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. We have your hard drives, Brad. We have the wire transfers, and thanks to your sister-in-law, we have you on video confessing to the hit." Brad's knees buckled. The fight drained out of him, leaving only a pathetic, terrified whimpering. He twisted his head, trying to look back at the living room, trying to find someone else to blame. It was Tiana, he screamed, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the snot on his upper lip. It was her idea. "She made me do it. I just wanted the money. She is the one who wanted her dead. Please, I will testify. I will give you everything." I walked into the kitchen just in time to see them drag him away. He looked small. He looked cheap. The arrogance that had filled the room just minutes ago was gone, replaced by the cowardly reality of a man who had never been anything more than a parasite in a suit. Aunt May smoothed her jacket and adjusted her hat, looking down at him with disdain. "Trash," she muttered, dusting off her hands. "Just pure trash." Tiana watched the kitchen door swing shut behind her husband and the federal agents. She was alone. The room was silent, save for the hum of the projector fan and the distant wail of sirens approaching the property. The investors had fled. The friends had vanished. The only people left were the police and the sister she had tried to murder. Her legs finally gave out. She collapsed onto the Persian rug, her knees hitting the floor with a heavy thud. She did not try to run. Instead, she crawled forward, moving toward me on her hands and knees. She reached out, grabbing the hem of my pristine white tuxedo trousers with her wine-stained fingers. "Keisha, please," she sobbed, her voice cracking into a desperate wail. "You cannot let them take me. I am your sister. I am your big sister. I changed your diapers. I walked you to school. We are blood, Keisha. You cannot send your own blood to prison." It was Brad. He manipulated me. I was scared. "Please, baby sister. Mercy." I looked down at her. She looked pathetic. The woman who had sneered at me in the hospital, who had called me a bitch while I lay dying, was now weeping at my feet, begging for the bond she had tried to sever with a knife. I stepped back, pulling my leg away from her grasp, as if she were something contagious. I reached into the inside pocket of my blazer. I did not pull out a weapon. I pulled out a folded manila envelope. "You kept talking about family tonight, Tiana," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "You told everyone we were soulmates. You told everyone you were the rightful heir to the Williams legacy because we shared the same DNA." I tossed the envelope onto the floor in front of her. It landed with a soft slap. "Open it," I commanded. Tiana looked up, her face streaked with mascara and tears. Her hands shook as she picked up the envelope and tore it open. She pulled out a stack of documents. The top page was a genetic ancestry report. The second page was a sealed adoption decree from 35 years ago. "What is this?" she whispered, scanning the pages, her eyes darting back and forth. This says 0% match." "That is right," I said, leaning down so I was eye level with her. "You appealed to my blood, Tiana. But here is the truth. We do not share a single drop." Tiana gasped, dropping the papers as if they burned her skin. "No, that is a lie. Mom and Dad were good people," I interrupted, my voice hard as flint. "Too good for you. They found you in the system, Tiana. Your biological parents abandoned you. My parents took you in because they felt sorry for you. They loved you. They gave you their name. They gave you a home. They tried to raise you with values. But you never had their heart. You never had their spirit." I stood up straight, towering over her. "I always wondered why you were so different. Why you were so greedy, so hollow, so capable of evil. I used to think it was just jealousy. But now I know. It is nature, Tiana. You were a charity case that went wrong. You were never a Williams. You were just a guest in this family, and tonight your lease has officially expired." Tiana stared at the papers scattered on the rug. The foundation of her entire identity, the entitlement she had worn like a crown, crumbled in an instant. She was not the aggrieved heir. She was not the big sister. She was a stranger who had bitten the hand that fed her. "You are lying," she screamed, clawing at the rug. "You forged this." "The DNA does not lie," I said, cold and final. "And neither does the video of you trying to kill me. You are nothing to me, Tiana. You are not my sister. You are not my friend. You are just an inmate waiting for a number." I nodded to Sheriff Miller. "Get her out of my house." Sheriff Miller had his hand on her arm, ready to guide her to the squad car, but I raised a hand to stop him. "Hold on, Sheriff," I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a razor. "I am not done yet. There is one last thing she needs to know before you book her." Tiana looked up, hope flaring in her eyes for a brief second. She thought I was going to show mercy. She thought I was going to drop the charges. She was wrong. I walked over to the side table and picked up a thick envelope. I tapped it against my palm, watching her flinch. "You committed murder for money, Tiana. You betrayed me for a payout. You thought even if you got caught, you would still have your assets. You thought you could hire a high-priced lawyer and spin this. But you forgot that I am a businesswoman, and I never leave a loose end. I pulled a document from the envelope and held it up. It was a foreclosure notice stamped with the seal of the Fulton County Bank. That house in Buckhead you love so much, the one you and Brad have been pretending to own while drowning in debt. The bank finally got tired of your bounced checks. They foreclosed on the property this morning, Tiana. While you were at the hospital pretending to cry over my body, the marshals were putting your furniture on the curb. The locks have been changed. Your closet full of designer clothes is currently being picked over by passers-by. You are homeless. Tiana let out a strangled sound, a gasp that sounded like she had been punched in the gut. My shoes, she whispered, horror dawning on her face. My bags. I ignored her vanity and pulled out the second document. This one was the life insurance policy she had pinned all her hopes on. The $5 million golden ticket. And this, I said, waving the paper in the air. The policy you were so eager to cash. The money you killed for. You were right about the amount. $5 million tax-free. It is a fortune, but you are not the beneficiary anymore. I flipped the page to show the amendment section. The ink was still fresh signed and notarized 48 hours ago. I changed the beneficiary the moment I found out about the poison. I explained, my voice cold and steady. The entire $5 million is now irrevocably designated to the Atlanta Children's Disability Fund and the St. Jude Research Hospital. I figured since you tried to disable me, it was only fitting that the money go to help children who actually need care. Tiana stared at the paper, her eyes bulging. The color drained from her face, leaving it a sickly, ashy gray. The realization hit her harder than the handcuffs. She had done it all for nothing. She had destroyed her life, her marriage, and her freedom, and she was walking away with absolutely zero. You are broke, Tiana, I said, leaning in close to deliver the final blow. You are destitute. You have no home. You have no money. You have no family. And now you have no future. You are not just a criminal. You are a failure. Tiana screamed. It was not a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure materialistic agony. She lunged at me, her fingers clawing at the air, desperate to tear the documents from my hands, but Sheriff Miller yanked her back. She thrashed in his grip, howling like a wounded animal, not because she was going to prison, but because she was going to prison poor. Get her out of my sight, I said, turning my back on her. She is not worth the air she is breathing. Sheriff Miller signaled to his deputies and they moved in. Tiana did not go quietly. As the reality of the handcuffs settled onto her wrists, the last shred of her composure disintegrated. She did not walk with the dignity she had feigned all evening. She kicked and screamed, her heels scraping uselessly against the hardwood floors she had so desperately wanted to own. It was not my fault, she screeched, her voice raw and shrill, echoing off the high ceilings. It was Brad. He made me do it. He told me we had no choice. I am a victim here. I was just trying to survive. You cannot do this to me. I am Tiana Wilson. I am somebody. She twisted her body, trying to catch the eye of anyone who would listen, but the room was empty of sympathy. The few remaining guests turned their backs, unable to watch the ugly spectacle of her unraveling. She looked wild, her hair coming loose from its pins, the wine stain on her dress like a mark of Cain. You are making a mistake, she howled as they dragged her through the foyer. This is a setup. Keisha set me up. She is the crazy one. Look at her. She is evil. I stood perfectly still watching her thrash. I did not feel anger anymore. I did not feel hate. I just felt a profound exhaustion. She was a hurricane that had finally blown itself out, leaving nothing but wreckage in its wake. As they reached the heavy oak front doors, Tiana's eyes finally landed on the one person she should have been protecting. Maya was standing near the banister, her small figure almost swallowed by the shadows. She was wearing the faded black dress Tiana had forced her into, a stark contrast to the glitz of the party. Tiana stopped, struggling for a split second. Maya, She gasped, breathless. Baby, tell them. Tell them Mommy is a good person. Tell them I did it for us. Maya did not speak. She did not step forward. She did not cry. Her face was a mask of calm maturity far beyond her 10 years. She had watched her mother lie and steal and hurt people for as long as she could remember. Tonight, she had watched her mother try to bury her aunt. The bond was not just broken. It was incinerated. Maya looked at her mother and simply shook her head. It was a small motion, but it carried the weight of a final judgment. Get her out of here, Sheriff, I said, my voice soft but final. The deputy shoved Tiana through the doorway. Her screams continued outside, piercing the night air, mixing with the static of police radios and the slamming of car doors. It was Brad. It was the economy. It was the world. It was never Tiana. Even in the back of a squad car, she could not own her sins. When the heavy door finally clicked shut, cutting off the noise, the silence that rushed back into the house was heavy and sweet. I turned to look at Maya. She was still standing by the stairs, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. I walked over to her and knelt down so I was eye level. I did not try to hug her immediately. I waited. Maya looked at me, her dark eyes searching mine for any sign of the betrayal she was used to. Finding none, she took a small step forward. She reached out her hand, small and cold. I took it in mine, squeezing it gently. There were no tears in her eyes. She had run out of tears a long time ago. Is she coming back? Maya whispered, her voice steady. No, baby, I said firmly, standing up and keeping her hand tight in mine. She is never coming back. You are safe now. We are safe. Maya squeezed my hand back. It was the first time I had felt her grip tight. It was the grip of a survivor holding onto a lifeline. The nightmare was over. The house was quiet. And for the first time in years, it actually felt like a home. The morning sun streamed through the bay windows of my office, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the light. The house did not feel like a mausoleum anymore. The heavy velvet drapes that Tiana had insisted on were gone, replaced by sheer linen that let the world in. The air smelled of fresh coffee, and the lavender candle burning on my desk, not fear, an antiseptic. It had been 6 months. 6 months since the party. 6 months since the lights went out and the truth came out. I sat at my desk, reviewing the quarterly projections for Keisha Beauty. The scandal had not destroyed my company. Ironically, it had catapulted it into the stratosphere. The story of the businesswoman who survived a murder plot by her own sister had gone viral. People admired resilience. They bought my products not just for the quality, but for the story of the woman behind the brand. Sales had tripled. We were expanding into 3 new states next month. But the most important document on my desk was not a profit and loss statement. It was a framed certificate standing next to my laptop. The official decree of adoption. Maya sat on the rug across the room reading a book. She looked different. The hollow cheeks were filled out. The dark circles were gone, replaced by the bright, alert eyes of a healthy 10-year-old. She wore a bright yellow dress and her hair was braided in a style we had done together that morning. She was not a guest. She was my daughter. The peace was interrupted by the harsh ring of the landline. It was a specific number I kept active only for legal reasons. I looked at the caller ID. Correctional facility, inmate call. I hesitated. I could let it go to voicemail. I could block the number. But I looked over at Maya. She had lowered her book. She knew who it was. She did not look scared anymore. She gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. I picked up the receiver and pressed the speaker button. A robotic voice announced, "You have a prepaid call from an inmate, Tiana Wilson. To accept, press 1. I pressed the button. The line clicked open. Keisha Tiana voice filled the room. It was rougher now, stripped of the fake polish and the high society accent. It sounded desperate. Keisha, are you there? Don't hang up, please. I used my last phone credit to make this call. I said nothing. I just sat there listening to her breathe. It is hell in here, Keisha Tiana rushed on the words tumbling out. You have no idea. The food is inedible. It is freezing at night. I need money. Just a little. I need to buy things from the commissary. Soap, toothpaste, ramen. I know you have it. I saw the news. I saw the magazine cover. You are rich. You owe me this much. I am your sister. Maya stood up and walked over to the desk. She looked down at the phone. Her face was calm. There was no longing in her eyes. There was no pity. She heard the manipulation in her biological mother voice, and she recognized it for exactly what it was. A trap. Come on, Keisha. Tiana pleaded, her voice cracking into a sob. Do not be cruel. Just put a few $100s in my account. I will never ask for anything else. I am suffering. Does that make you happy? I looked at Maya. She reached out her hand and hovered it over the red disconnect button. She looked at me seeking permission. I smiled and nodded. We did not say a word. We did not offer a lecture. We did not offer forgiveness. We simply offered silence. Maya pressed the button. The line went dead, cutting off the begging mid-sentence. The room was instantly quiet again, filled only with the sound of birds chirping outside. Who was that, Mom? Maya asked, her voice light and unbothered. No one, I said, closing the file on my desk. Just a wrong number. Maya smiled and picked up her book. I turned back to my work. The past was a closed chapter behind bars where it belonged. The future was sitting right in front of me, reading a book in a sunbeam. We had work to do. The sun dipped low over the Atlantic Ocean, painting the sky in violent streaks of purple and gold. It was a stark contrast to the sterile fluorescent lights of the ICU where this journey had begun. I sat on the aft deck of the Phoenix, my newly acquired 60-foot yacht. The name was a cliché, perhaps, but it fit. I had burned to ash in that hospital bed, and I had risen from the flames stronger, richer, and wiser. The only sound was the rhythmic slap of water against the hull and the cry of seagulls following our wake. There were no heart monitors beeping. There were no lawyers shouting. There were no sisters plotting my demise in the next room. Maya sat across from me on a plush white divan. She was wearing a pair of oversized sunglasses and a sundress that caught the wind. She looked like a miniature movie star. The transformation was not just in her clothes, it was in her posture. She took up space now. She did not shrink. She did not hide. I reached for the silver teapot on the low table between us. The steam curled up, carrying the scent of bergamot and lavender. I poured a cup for myself, and then one for her, adding the splash of milk she liked. Here you go, baby, I said, handing her the delicate china cup. Careful, it is hot. Maya took the saucer with steady hands. She blew on the surface of the tea, watching the ripples. Then she took a small, sophisticated sip. She lowered the cup and looked at me over the rim of her sunglasses. A mischievous grin spread across her face. You know, Auntie Kay, she said, her tone conversational and light. What is it? I asked, leaning back against the cushions. She swirled the liquid in her cup. This tea is way better than the poison tea Mom used to make. It does not have that bitter almond aftertaste, and I am pretty sure this one will not put me in a coma. I froze for a second, my cup halfway to my lips. It was a dark joke, the kind of joke that would make an outsider gasp in horror. But between us, it was a secret language. It was proof that the monster under the bed was dead. Maya was not traumatized by the memory anymore. She had taken the weapon and turned it into a punchline. I threw my head back and laughed. It was a loud, uninhibited sound that carried out over the water. You are terrible, I said, wiping a tear of mirth from my eye. Absolutely terrible. But you are right, Maya said, her smile softening into something genuine. It tastes like freedom. I looked at her, at this brave, resilient little girl who was now my daughter in every way that mattered. We had both been discarded by Tiana. We had both been used as pawns in her game of greed. But she had underestimated us. She thought we were weak because we loved her. She did not realize that our love for each other was the thing that would destroy her. I stood up and walked to the railing, looking out at the endless expanse of blue. The horizon was wide open. There were no walls. There were no ceilings. Tiana was sitting in a 6x8 cell right now, staring at a concrete wall. She had wanted to trap me in a box, but she had built her own cage instead. I took a deep breath of the salty air filling my lungs. Family isn't whose blood runs in your veins, I thought, watching the sun touch the water. Family is who stands by you when the blood is spilled. I turned back to Maya, who was reaching for a macaron. So I asked, Costa Rica next week? Or maybe the Mediterranean? Maya took a bite of the cookie and shrugged. Wherever you go, I go. We are a team. That is right, I said, raising my teacup in a toast to the sunset. To us. To the survivors. To the winners. The yacht cut through the waves, sailing smoothly toward a future that was finally entirely our own. The harrowing saga of Keisha and Tiana serves as a brutal reminder that greed is a corrosive force that devours everything in its path, including humanity itself. It teaches us that family is not defined by shared DNA, but by shared loyalty, love, and protection. Tiana's downfall illustrates that underestimating the quiet strength of those you wrong is a fatal error. Ultimately, the story proves that while lies may sprint, the truth runs a marathon. You cannot build a lasting empire on the destruction of others. True power lies in resilience, integrity, and the courage to cut toxic ties. If you enjoyed this tale of betrayal and ultimate justice, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more gripping stories.